Well, welcome back to part 3 of the silage zone around storage. Today I'm going to talk about the last section, which deals with safe and accurate defacing, managing that edge closely, how we avoid sectioning a pile or a bunker, and then managing that face during warmer weathers, over 50 degrees. But first of all, I'm going to go over a little bit about if you're trying to manage and measure this shrink or this dry matter loss, how to do it accurately. And then the very last thing I'm going to cover will be the main points from part 1 and part 2 about how to manage this overall effort in maintaining quality, reducing dry matter loss, and doing it safely. So the first thing that I wanted to talk to you about, again, are those numbers. When we think about what that dry matter reduction could mean to us, it's around $1,552 per 100 cows on a 5% savings, or 3 times that much for 15%. Today, if you look at this, we've got a great opportunity at feed out on the bunkers and stacks, maybe not so much on the bags, as long as they're on a good hard surface that we don't have to fight the mud. When we think about when silage is made, what actually happens is those water-soluble carbohydrates are lost. They basically go into the fermentation process, and part of that fermentation process means that we end up with a higher water percentage in the final silage product. So that, you can see up there, typical 34.8 would end up at a 33.1 in a normal fermentation process. And we lose those water-soluble carbohydrates, those starches and sugars during that fermentation process. And if we do everything right, we keep that to a minimum. When you look at the next slide, this gives you the exact equation of what takes place when that happens. 60% of that dry matter loss actually remains as weight in that silage in the form of water. So again, be careful if you're trying to measure this dry matter loss that you do it accurately. You can see here on the last slide in dealing with this topic that a 15% dry matter loss may only equate to an actual 2.1% shrink in weight because of, again, that 60% of the water staying back behind, and we know that what we feed the cows is the dry matter. So moving on to the topics for today, we want to make sure that the machinery we have is large enough to safely manage that face that it's trying to work with. Whether it's a rake or a rotary defacer that leaves that nice smooth edge where we don't leave pockets for air to get into, that it's going to decrease our quality. Once we get it defaced, we want to make sure that all that work that we've done to keep the water and the air out, once we start cutting that plastic back, that we don't give it an advantage to try to do that again. So we try to keep that edge as close to the front as we can. Maybe work with it 2 times a week at least, maybe even 3, and cut it back just enough to get your feeding done, and then put some sand bags down across that front edge to keep that air from working its way back underneath there. And in all of this, when you're working with that edge, let's do it safely. You see here a retrieval system that you hook on with the harness, anchor it to the back of the pile or bunker, so that that person that's working up there works a lot like a safety belt. If they happen to slip or fall off, or if the front edge gives way, that quick reaction catches them and they don't fall and get hurt. The next section I wanted to talk about is something that I'm starting to see a lot on dairies, and sometimes it's just flat out because of necessity. But that's sectioning, where you're making a cut back through a bunker or a pile and then coming back. Dan Bollinger did some work up in Michigan where he showed on a face, he took samples at 3, 12, 18, 24, 30, and 36 inches from the side going in from where it had been cut through, and measured the nutritional values on there. And I'm just going to look at a couple of them. If you look at the left edge of this slide, what that is, that's the edge that's the closest to the exposed face. So these 2 examples, first of all, if you look at this, we're going to look at NDFD 30. It goes from 46.9 to 59.5 at 36 inches. So we're losing a lot of NDFD the closer it gets to that edge. The second one we look at there is the starch. It'll go from 29% to 42%. Just think of the nutrition that we're losing by sectioning that silage in that manner. In this particular study, he found that that spoilage, you couldn't pick it up with an NIR camera. It goes well beyond what it can pick up, all the way into at least 36 inches deep. So in this particular case, you saw the first picture about how big of a silo that was. Over 20% of what they were feeding every day had reduced quality due to that extended face exposure. And this was a really high quality bunker where they were at over 20 pounds dry matter per cubic foot of packing. So it was a very tightly packed bunker. 11C33 or some other L. buchneri would slow that down, but it's not going to mitigate all those circumstances. So this is one of those things where we begin with the end in mind. Let's make sure that as we're building out our bunkers and piles that we're looking to get that total face removed at least 6 inches per day, every day. The next one you look at is just some work that I showed earlier on that front end fermentation where we've got a 2.1% savings. But look at what 11C33 can do, especially when ambient temperatures are over 50 degrees where yeasts and molds are active. We get a 4.2% savings in dry matter. That's a huge benefit to feeding, buchneri, especially on the silage that's going to be fed during the warmer months of the year. And what other benefit does that have? Look at what it does. This is a study that Powell Smith did that showed where he went and sampled several TMRs across Wisconsin and showed the differences between non-inoculated silages that had other inoculants, and then silages that had Lactobacillus buchneri in them. You can see whether you feed twice a day, so the 12-hour, there's still a significant difference in that temperature and what you're losing. And at 24 hours, it remains very prominent. So again, we've got to concentrate on what we have for an opportunity around reducing that dry matter loss. And I want to go through those things one more time that we've covered on all three sections. The biggest thing I can say is begin with the end in mind. One of the biggest things we can do is size everything according to what we're going to need for carryover and getting that 6 inches off every day. And then do the calculations. We're going to be making silage and haylage here within a month probably. So make sure that you've got enough tractors on your place to get 800 pounds of tractor on that pile or bunker the whole time that it's being built. And make sure that we're doing it only 6 inches at a time so that we get that pack that we need. If it's a pile, make sure we have that 3-to-1 slope so that we're getting that maximum hydraulic pressure down from the silage and from the machinery. When you go to cut, make sure that we don't have it too wet, and always, constantly, whether it's you or a custom chopper, keep those knives sharp so that we don't end up with a bunch of leachate. If possible, again, we're trying to keep out air and water, and it may take a while to get harvest done, so cover your silage as you go, if possible. Keep those heights of the bunkers and piles within the safe operating height of that machinery, and then again, once at least, twice maybe, 3 would be great to manage that front edge of the silage every day, every week. Use a researched crop-specific inoculant for that front-end fermentation so that we way outperform those natural occurring bacteria that are on the crop in the field. Whenever possible, on a bunker, make sure we try to make a bag out of that bunker. Get those sides protected either with the silage, oxygen limiting silage cover like a silo stop, or the 8.5 mil polyethylene. Provide a well-drained, really stable surface for the bags, keeping a straight line and keeping those stretch marks maxed out so that we know we're getting the highest pack possible. Whenever possible, deface the entire silage face daily. Avoid that sectioning that we just went over so that we keep the feed quality high for everything that we're taking off there. And then during the warmer months on your piles and bunkers and bags, use an L. buchneri for that portion of feed that's going to be fed during the warmer months so that we maintain a really nice palatable TMR and reduce that feed out shrink that we experience. So to wrap up again, begin with the end in mind. As much as possible, calculate what you want and can afford to have for carryover. If you think you're limited on space, think about putting more tractors on that pile to increase the dry matter pounds per cubic foot that you're packing, to increase the capacity that you have for the footprint of your bunker or pile. Use what you need to be safe. Keep people away from danger with the harness activity. Have machinery that can safely manage that face at the height that it's at, and look forward to those savings that you're going to capture on reducing your dry matter loss and preserving the quality and doing it safely.
That concludes this Pioneer Growing Point Agronomy video podcast. Visit our page on pioneer.com and follow us on Twitter and Facebook for more agronomy insights.